Hi, you should play old games. As styles and ways of designing games have shifted over the years, as older games get remade to fit into these new frameworks, it can feel like the gaming industry at large wants old games to gather dust and eventually disappear. Of course, a number of remakes pay a lot of respect to their original counterparts, and some companies like Xbox are fighting for game preservation, but as time goes on, I think many of these games will eventually no longer be playable in their original form. So, one of many reasons to play these games is to simply experience something before it's gone. But a more succinct reason maybe to do so is that a good number of them are just still fantastic experiences. Yes, they have their quirks, yes, they can be absolutely infuriating sometimes. Nonetheless, if you're tired of the direction that AAA games have been taking, diving into some old classics can feel invigorating and perhaps remind you why you might have fallen in love with the medium in the first place. It can also be quite eye-opening if you're playing them for the first time as an adult, for example. But what do I actually mean by old games? I'm not suggesting that you should find a way to play Tennis for Two from the 1950s. Although that would certainly be cool, I'm also not really suggesting that you should play old arcade games like Pac-Man or Tetris. Is it even still possible to play these games in arcades somewhere? In any case, no. The old games I'm getting at are mostly games from the 1990s and 2000s. This time in video game history is filled with a plethora of amazing and in certain ways timeless classics. Some people still count games such as Final Fantasy VII, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time or Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3 among their favorite games of all time. Of course, nostalgia plays a role in people's love for these games, but I've discovered, diving into classics for the first time, that some of them are really amazing no matter when you play them. Let me show you what I mean with some older games that I recently played for the first time. So, let's take a look at these absolute bangers, shall we? Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, an action-adventure game made by Ubisoft and released in 2003, is a perfect example for this. There are many good reasons to play it. One that stands out the most though is its platforming, both the mechanics and the level design. The footage speaks for itself really. All the movement animations are butter smooth, while also being very precise and responsive when the game requires you to combine different moves together. On top of that, the game constantly finds new and interesting ways to use these mechanics, and these things are still so good that they can compete with other similar games today. I played Jedi Survivor soon after Sands of Time, and not only does the influence ring on, there's a solid argument to be made that the latter has better platforming. I know there were other 3D platformers in its vein at the time, but it seems to be highly influential to the genre to this very day. Of course, the Sands of Time is not perfect, particularly in its combat. It has just as many great ideas there as it does in the platforming, but the game sometimes throws way too many enemies at you that can easily stunlock you. Frankly, it sucks in those moments, and it's a stellar example for what I said about frustrations in old games. But then again, is that really something exclusive to older titles? Not really. Plenty of new games from the last and current decade can put you in a temper just as much, despite all the quality of life improvements that have become standard over the years. Maybe these frustrations in older games are generally caused by different things. And of course, it's easy to blame a game for archaic game design in a moment of rage, but let's return to Prince of Persia for a second. Despite these frustrations, The Sands of Time feels timeless to me. Pun not intended. It's not just the cool parkour, mind you. I also feel that the art style and the graphical fidelity still look perfect for this game. It doesn't look realistic, and that's great. Why? Because the whole game feels very unreal and a bit like a dream. So many aspects of the game lean into that, not just the graphics. The visual design of the whole palace, the enemies, as well as the hypnotic soundtrack and certain moments in the game. They all hone in on that dreaminess, and it just works still 20 years later. It doesn't matter if the remake ever sees the light of day, because this game is still phenomenal, and you can get it for like $2 on Steam, and even your old laptop from 2010 that is gathering dust in the basement can run it. Did I say that we are going to talk about some absolute bangers? Well, so here's the deal. I hated playing Metal Gear Solid 1. I didn't like it, and I still don't. Was it because I played it on a PS Vita and was forced to endure a horrible German dub? Partially, yes, but actually was some very annoying encounter design and imprecise gameplay. But was it still worth playing? Yes, I think so, because even though it drives me up the wall, it's also an extremely creative game with so many ideas that I've never seen before. The way that you have to fight certain bosses, for example. Also that torture part, goddamn, did I hate it, but it's a cool idea, alright? The story as well, even though I could really not tell you what the hell it was about, was absolutely insane and therefore quite fun to see unfold. It's the one part of the game that I don't have too many issues with. I would never replay the game, but I might rewatch the cutscenes someday. The main reason why I think playing the original Metal Gear Solid is still worth it is because it really enriches the experience of playing the sequel, Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. Man, how did Kojima go from such an exciting subtitle to Death Stranding 2 on the beach? Anyways, I only recently played this game and at the start I feared I might have all the same problems with it as with the first game. Fortunately, it only got better and better as it went on, as I started to realize all the improvements it made over the first game, and as the insanity of the story began to unfold. It's still as boundlessly creative as the first game, but it seems to know much better what works and what's just frustrating. Now you can absolutely play this without having played the first one, but you can only notice and appreciate all the gameplay improvements and connecting story elements if you have. What I respect so much about these games is how much they make you think outside of the box in all aspects. In boss fights and enemy encounters, some puzzles, for lack of a better word, but also in their stories. These stories not only deconstruct and satirize military, spy, secret agent stories, but they tackle some existential themes in unique ways. I'm especially talking about the final hours of the second game when I say that, and if you know, you know, it gets wild. The Metal Gear Solid games have no doubt inspired many stealth action games, but nothing else I've played is quite like them. So, for this reason, and the ones I mentioned before, I think these games are a must-play, frankly. Especially if you want to see how games from over 20 years ago have pushed the limits of the medium, and still do. A number of other old games from the early 2000s that I've played have been equally memorable experiences, like the original Ratchet and Clank and GTA Vice City. I definitely don't love these as much as The Sands of Time or Metal Gear Solid 2. Indeed, in many moments I hated them and almost didn't finish them. Both games had terrible checkpoint systems and extremely frustrating mechanics, though granted I did not play them on optimal platforms, a PS Vita and a damn tablet respectively. But what I want to stress here is that despite these frustrations, the experience of playing these games was memorable indeed, and it's just fascinating to see how these series have changed over time. To see the evolution of a series isn't the only good reason to play early entries of still ongoing series. They can, regardless of their quirks, also just feel very refreshing. This isn't just the case for franchises that have become a bit stale or stagnant, like Assassin's Creed perhaps. I'm jumping a bit in years here, but I think that the first Dark Souls can still feel fresh even if you've already played a number of FromSoft's other games. Dark Souls 2, 3, Bloodborne, Sekiro, Elden Ring. There are many games I could mention here, like the first Mass Effect or Bioshock. These being games I found to have really unique and refreshing experiences to offer, no matter when you play them, really. Though, of course, this is subjective and not everyone will feel the same. I want to end this on the note that game preservation is important. While a number of remakes are doing fantastic things, playing original games from the 2000s or earlier can be really worthwhile, despite how frustrating they can be. Are companies milking old games by remastering or porting them to newer platforms? Sure, they do, and often at ridiculous price points. Overall though, I see it as a good thing, because it acknowledges that people still want to play these games and don't want to buy an old console and expensive copies on eBay. I played Metal Gear Solid 2 on my PS5, and I'm very glad I was able to do so and didn't have to go out and buy a super expensive used copy of it for PS3. It's also nice to see how much Xbox has been pushing backwards compatibility, and to an extent also what Sony is doing, making it possible to play older games via streaming. On PC, of course, it's also so easy to get older games, and often they cost almost nothing. The question is though, as more and more games start to disappear, for how much longer will you be able to get access to some of them? Big franchises like Metal Gear are unlikely to go away anytime soon, but smaller, more unknown games that never even got a port or remaster, they might be gone soon, who knows? Just look at what happened with Spec Ops: The Line, which just got delisted one day and now you can no longer buy it, officially. I'm being overdramatic, sure, but it's always a shame when cultural artifacts, for lack of a better word, are lost. So, go and play some old games while you can, and I'll see you next time.